was, you know? Maybe not necessarily even about politics or whatever, but just about what he thought about the world and the way he interpreted the world, and I loved it. And then my mum took me to see him on my 17th birthday as a birthday present. We went to Hamer Hall in Melbourne at the Arts Centre there. Okay, so we went down from the country. It's like a good 3-hour drive. So me and my mum on a date for my 17th. Yeah. And we didn't even have great tickets. I think it's about 3,000 seats that room, and we were right up the back. But I have never enjoyed anything more in my life. 2.5, 3 hours. I just felt like it was so intimate, which I guess is a strange thing to say about a guy who was miles away from me, and 3,000 other people were there. But 8 to 80, they were laughing their head off at this guy, and I just thought, oh my God, he is entertaining people with nothing more than his words, his thoughts. There's no guitar, there's no band, there's no play, there's no props. It is just, he is so good at doing something that we all do for free every day, that people are willing to come and watch him do it. And I thought that was magnificent. And I remember 17 years old sitting in that room going, this is what I want to do. And I never dreamed that I'd ever play anywhere that big. I just thought, I want to be around this. And I wasn't even at that stage even thinking necessarily that I would be a comic. I just knew that I wanted to be around comedy, because I thought, these people, they say things, and I want to be a part of that club, you know. I want to be a free spirit like that, you know. And in this show that I've been doing this year, my stand-up show, and it's so daggy, and this is not something I point out in the show, it's not part of the show, it's something I do for myself. I'm wearing my high school Doc Marten boots. They're year 11 boots, and so they're 21 something years old or something like that. And they were the boots that I was wearing when I went and saw Billy Connolly.
Brilliant.
And so in my mind, I just wanted, it's my 15th year at the Comedy Festival this year. It felt like it should mean something. And it doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but it needs to mean something to me. You should go, where am I at? What am I trying to do? So I wanted to get in touch with, particularly because with going to America and stuff, I am starting again. I'm sort of imbued with that enthusiasm of starting again, and what it feels like when you first started, and what it feels like when you first fell in love with it. And so I wanted to reflect that just by going, these are the shoes that I was wearing when I first thought. Who would have thought that all these years later,
you'd still have the shoes?
I'd still have the shoes, and I'd be doing this, you know, it's amazing. So, Billy Connolly, number one. Then I'm going to say Ted Robinson. Now, if people don't know Ted Robinson, and they might not know the name, he's a TV producer. He produced a TV show called The Big Gig, which was the first time I'd ever seen anything that he did. And that was very influential on me. We grew up in the country, there was 2 TV channels, there was like a Southern Cross and ABC. And The Big Gig was the first time I'd ever seen that sort of comedy, and I loved it. All the people on that, the Doug Anthony All-Stars I adored, and Wendy Harmer and Glenn Nicholas, and all these people doing this amazing work, you know, and edgy and confrontational, and as a kid, just so exciting, you know. We used to tape it because they would simulcast it on the radio, and we'd tape it and listen to it over and over again. And I remember Jamoan was on doing this routine about seagulls not having any eyebrows, and me and my mates would like pass around this tape, and we all knew this routine by heart. And we ended up going down to the city getting fake IDs to go to the last laugh so we could see Jamoan. First time I ever saw stand-up, see Jamoan, and Tony Martin and Mick Malloy were doing support.
Oh, that's awesome.
Amazing, right? And we're all underage, and we all got there at like 7 for like a 10 o'clock show or something like that, because we didn't know anything about comedy, you know? Yeah, drinking margaritas up the front of the last laugh with our fake IDs to watch some stand-up comedy, rock and roll. So Ted produced that show, and I started to look for his name, because and he had a lot to do with a lot of Andrew Denton shows. And then I would suddenly see him, and Ted Robinson is the producer of Good News Week, which was the first real TV thing that not the first one I did, but the first one that had any influence on my career. Like, I did Good News Week, and people started to recognise me off Good News Week, and Good News Week definitely led to my relationship with Adam Spencer, which led to the radio, which has then ongoing led to everything. So Good News Week is certainly the most influential career thing that happened to me. And part of the reason that I still, at every opportunity today, will, like, you know, if they ask and I can do it, I would not ever hesitate, you know. And it wouldn't matter if that show was on at 2:30 in the morning and I had to pay to be on it, I would be on it, you know. A, I love to do it, but B, I owe them quite a lot. But Ted then went on to produce The Glass House.
Yes.
And so that was how I learned about television. And I knew nothing about television at that stage, nothing. I had never had any ambitions to have my own show.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't want to host. I always saw myself as the kid making fun of the host. I wanted to be the person on the end. I wanted to be Dave Hughes. I wanted to be Mikey Robbins. I wanted to be Glenn Robbins. I wanted to be the person who can, you know, sit on the end and muck things up, not the person who had to
be serious.
Had to be in control. And Ted made me. He said, no, this show doesn't happen unless you do this, and this is something that you have the capacity to do. And very early on, it was almost like I intentionally tried not to host well because I felt like I didn't want anyone to think I was a host. I always wanted people to think I was a comedian. And through all the mistakes I made and through all that journey where I got so many things wrong and would have been such a pain in the ass on so many occasions, he was inspiring, you know, like just... And to this day, I mean, even when I bought my house and stuff like that, I asked Ted more than I asked my dad. You know, like, he's a man that his instincts I trust, he gets me, and I love him dearly. So he would definitely be second on that list, without a doubt. Then I'm going to say it would be someone when I first started doing stand-up. So it'd be a toss-up. It was kind of a group of people at that time. I was very influenced by the people who were the stars of the Melbourne comedy scene when I first started going to gigs and wanted to do gigs. And they were people like Greg Fleet, Anthony Morgan, Judith Lucy, Sue-Ann Post, Linda Gibson, who sadly passed away. But they were the kind of kings of... Matt King, who has written that show Whites. He was a stand-up on the scene at the time. In fact, him and Marty Sheargold and Fleety used to do a thing called New Joke City, which was like a comedy trio, and there was a lot of experimental comedy going on at the time, and I took a little bit from all of that. So it was that era of comedians. There was a guy called Dave Taranto who used to run a room in the Prince Patrick Hotel in Richmond called The Cheese Shop, and it was the home of creativity in Melbourne comedy when Melbourne comedy was probably at its strongest it's been in the last 20 years. So that was certainly, really influential on me. And then Mikey Robbins. Mikey was the first person who did anything in the media with me. We were talking about this when we were at the Adelaide Fringe recently, and he reminded me that probably about 12, 13 years ago, I was doing my first ever Adelaide Fringe. I am the Wilris to know people in this little venue. And Mikey and Helen had me on The Breakfast Show, which was the first time I had done anything. And they liked me and they had me back. And that grew into, obviously, when I was doing Good News Week and stuff like that. And Mikey and I are lifelong friends, and I love working with him, and there's a lot of mutual respect. And the other thing about Mikey is, which is a very hard thing to do, he never treated me like a kid. Even when I was a kid and knew nothing, he treated me like, a peer. And I try, when I can, and remember it, to treat people like that as well, because I think it's a really nice thing to do. And it's hard not to be condescending if you know. It's hard when you know heaps more than someone else, just from experience, not because of anything else, not to, tell them that. Not to let them make their own mistakes and have their own journey and be supportive. But he was very good at doing that. And then I guess the other people, and I won't bang on too much about it, but certainly stand-up comedians like Bill Hicks and George Carlin, Richard Pryor, and more modern times Louis C.K. Comedians who strive to be popular but have a genuine edge and something interesting to say.
Yes.
Like, they're very influential on the style of comedy that I like to do. I like to do things that I've always been of the belief that you don't have to dumb something down to make it popular.
Yes.
If you talk about something smart in an engaging way, that can be popular. Because you know what? Heaps of people are really smart. And people like feeling smarter.
Yes.
That's why people watch things like The Daily Show and Colbert, and so that they can go, oh, now I get what's going on in Egypt, because you presented it to me in a way that I can understand and something I can be excited about. So that style of comedy is very influential on my approach.
Yeah. And
then, these days, I would say even my peers, like people like Justin Hamilton and Tom Gleeson, and people that Tommy Dean, and just people that I bang around with at gigs who I love, but all comics, like I feed off them. Like, I mean, the other night we were doing this room in Melbourne called Soft Belly, and it's a tiny little room, that some young comics run, but it's a great comedy room. Yeah. And I had some new stuff to try, so I snuck down to do an unannounced spot in the second bracket. Yeah. And there was another comic doing an unannounced spot in the second bracket, Glenn Robbins. So the second bracket of this was myself and Glenn Robbins at this room in front of 40 people on St. Patrick's Day. Yeah. But then Glenn and I sat around for ages afterwards and just talked through some stuff that each of us had thought about. Comedy is very collaborative in that way. Yeah. So, I'm constantly inspired by seeing what Sam Simmons is doing, or what, Melinda Buttle's doing. Yeah. It doesn't have to be someone who's at your level. It could be someone who's way beyond your level. It can be someone who's not quite at the level you're at. But that doesn't mean you can't find inspiration in each of those things. And I kind of saved the best and most complex for last, which is Andrew Denton. Yeah. And Andrew was very much there from the moment I discovered comedy. Like, my favourite show on television was a show called The Money or the Gun, and if people have not seen that, if there's any way, I don't know if they've ever put it out on DVD or anything like that, but if they should, ABC Shop, you just released Glasshouse on iTunes. Nobody wants to see a topical comedy show with me with my big fat head when I didn't know how to do anything, like read an auto cue and my eyes are looking in the wrong direction. Put Andrew's show on iTunes so people can watch that. But I thought that show was stunning. Yeah. And Ian Simmons, who was head writer at Glasshouse and is head writer at Good News Week, and he's one of the greatest unknown people in Australian comedy, who has been behind, your Andrew Dentons, your Paul McDermott's, myself, and a bunch of other, really interesting things. Yeah. He was, I know, one of the big writers on that, man. I just thought that show, because it was intelligent. I mean, they did a whole episode on disability. Year of the Patronising Bastard, it was called. It won awards, but it was hilarious and informative and interesting, and wasn't afraid to be silly. At the end of each show, they'd do a different band would do a different version of Stairway to Heaven. So I didn't have to. It was the first time. I have that album. And it was the first time that I went, right, you can be smart and silly within a second. Yeah. And obviously people who have some awareness of the work that I do, see that writ large in what I do. Yeah. I like to mix up, there's a great quote we used on the poster this year from The Age, just because it describes my act better than I could ever describe my act, and it just said, nobody combines political commentary and dick jokes quite like Wil Anderson, and I was like, good, because that's what I try to do. Yeah. I try to say something that I do think is serious and something that I think is just stupid and funny, and that is from me watching that show when I was 14 years old. Yeah. That has informed very much the way that I have lived the rest of my life. So now, obviously, Andrew produces Gruen, and we work really closely together. And I mean, I can't imagine, really, think about it. I was a kid living on Anderson's Road in bloody Denison, country Victoria, family of farmers. My brother's a farmer, third generation, sitting watching the big gig and The Money or the Gun. And then 20 years later, I've worked with the two people who I was most influenced by and most, that's an amazing experience that you could never even imagine in your wildest dreams, so that you'd have that opportunity. But also with that,